Kugelblitz, and accidentally merged all of the fundamental forces in that region and created an independent bubble of space-time around us. That shot of neutrinos probably didn't help much. He didn't trail off this time. Rather, he just stopped talking and slightly tilted his head to the side as his left eye began to strobe even more intensely. Sneaking a quick glance back, Sarah could see that Terry was sitting still as a statue, strapped tightly into her chair. Baidi, on the other hand, had wedged himself into a well-padded corner of the purpose-built cage. Though neither looked particularly thrilled by their respective circumstances, they weren't making a fuss or trying to escape. Sure, the two may be exceptionally smart for animals, but lack of deeper comprehension was likely saving them from panicking. Looking back to Mick, she glared at him for a moment, in a futile attempt to telepathically extract information that would alleviate her deepening dread. However, Mick's expression almost told her that she didn't want to know. Before she could formulate a question with an answer that could be understood, Mick snapped his eyes straight into hers. So I got some good news and some bad news. Not even waiting to give Sarah a chance to pick an order? Mick continued. Bad news is, I have no idea how fast we're going, or if there will be any relativistic effects from it. Good news! It looks like the bubble is going to collapse any second now. Badder news is that the bubble collapsing is probably going to quench the coils on the reactors connected to the field generator. That might kill them. But the consolation is, but we brought a self-sufficient station with resource extraction capabilities that's meant to feed and house a crew of 10 for as long as we can harvest hydrogen and helium. So you don't think we're going to die? All in all, things could be worse, Sarah thought to her. But you have no idea where we're going to be, what the actual damage to your ship is going to be, and you expect me to sit on this barely held together rust bucket with you for God knows how long. No offense, Espen. Inoni taken. Estimated time until field collapse, 6 seconds. Closing cockpit radiation shielding. Please brace yourselves. Espen chimed in as the thick sheet of semi-transparent beryllium gold alloy quickly dropped in front of viewports. Both Mick and Sarah snapped their heads forward and did their best to align themselves in their seats to minimize any possible forces. Mick closed his eyes, tilted his head ever so slightly down, and whispered under his breath, "Hold on tight. This might be scary. You'll be fine. I promise." For a moment she thought he was talking to himself before she heard a small whimper and an ever smaller chirp from behind. She took a deep breath, and right as she let it out, the ship jerked violently for a moment. But it was just a moment. What followed, however, was far more intense. In fact, nothing would have quite prepared her for this experience, even through the quarter-meter thick sheet of semi-transparent anti-radiation panel. Even through electronically polarized dampeners of half-meter thick polyglass front viewports. And even through her own eyelids, the bright white light was visible. In desperation, Sarah tried to move her hands in front of her face in a vain attempt to block out the blinding beam. "I can see the fucking bones in my hands. What the fuck?" She screamed without even thinking. The outlines of her phalanges faded into white, just like everything else. The light could not be stopped as it seared its way through anything in its path. Everything in her vision was white, but it suddenly didn't feel like the light was burning its way through her skull anymore. Luckily, she knew she was still alive and could hear when Mick called out from next to her. "Fucking hell, Espen, status report." "How bad was the flash we got?" Mick asked the ship's AI. Interior, mounted cockpit, and photo sensors detected high, but not permanently damaging, levels of optical photons and non-ionizing radiation. Somehow the artificial voice almost sounded relieved. Residual magnetic field and forward radiation shielding were sufficient to reduce all other forms of potentially hazardous radiation to tolerable levels. Quantum vacuum core and attached reactor units have been completely quenched. Extensive damage to reactor core regulators detected. Recommendation: replacement would be more efficient than repairs. Main station reactor and propulsion systems show no damage and are operating within expected parameters. All primary, secondary, and tertiary systems are operational. And base communication systems are functioning. However, I cannot seem to establish a link to the QTM network. Please stand by as I run diagnostics and try to determine the fault. Holy fuck, we made it. Migvetch, Shemnado, Migvetch, Mick exclaimed, with Mick's cyber eye better able to readjust to the normal cabin light level than any organic eye. He tried to take stock of their situation. Espen, lower the rad shield and give me a location report. Unbuckling one of the latches on his harness, Mick leaned over so he could see each of the occupants with his properly adjusted eye. Sarah was lightly rubbing her eyes, in between short bursts of rapidly blinking. Besides her eyes having difficulty readjusting, she seemed completely fine. Looking back, Bitey was still tucked deep into his padded corner, and it sounded like he was softly singing to himself. As soon as he got the spin gravity back and things figured out, Bitey would get free flight through the greenhouse for as long as he wanted. Leaning further to look directly behind, he saw Terry still in the same position, but moving her head side to side with her ears lifted and nostrils flaring. Even though she likely couldn't see anything, she didn't seem too bothered by it. As his biological eye finally began to make out distinct shapes and differences between light and dark, Mick moved to unstrap himself and help his less than able companions. "Hey Espen, any update on our location? And also, can you start up the spin gravity? I need to let the animals out." A soft but noticeable thunk sound could be heard and felt as the spin sections of the ship began to spin up. This spin gravity system re-engaging. All. Though that initial statement sounded purely automated, the way the AI continued was slightly different. Precise calculations of location. Data are incomplete and exact location has yet to be determined. However, based on current simulations of pulsar maps, our position is approximately 1.2 billion astronomical units from Mars, with a margin of error of plus or minus 6%. Initial sensor data show we are in a rough but stable orbit around a planetary body, with the approximate mass of Mars, which orbits a binary star system. Preliminary scans are detecting a stable geomagnetic field, nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, presence of large bodies of water, and large clusters of artificial structures surrounded by vegetation. Communication systems are also picking up large amounts of scattered EM signal sources in our local area. Well, that's definitely 2 stars. It was Sarah who spoke first as her eyes slowly began to work properly again. She pointed forwards through the now unobscured viewports at the binary stars which were slowly coming over the horizon of the planet. As the light began to shine across the planet, the vibrant blue seas and purple, red, and green streaks of land engulfed the humans' attention, both jaws hanging low. They truly believed they were the first humans to set eyes on this planet, let alone any extrasolar planet. To them, it felt like an eternity of gawking as time seemed to slow to allow them to fully appreciate the majesty of the rising suns over a life-bearing alien planet. The orbits of the nearly twin stars around their barycenter created the illusion of a slight shift from red to blue stars as they danced around each other. It is system alert. Incoming all frequencies transmission. The AI broke the silence. Text only using standard protocols and no encryption. Subsystem quarantine of data shows no virus or risks to system. Reading message now. Attention unknown vessel. Deathworlders miss. The much softer, feminine tone of mixed ship's AI was replaced by a booming, masculine voice. This is the hammer of Tenyosh, flagship of the First Fleet of the Third Matriarch. Caution, you have entered an active zone of devourer incursion. Your assistance thus far has greatly appreciated. However, it seems your vessel has suffered damage and lacks proper shielding and defensive armaments appropriate for a devourer incursion. Please power down any active shielding and weapon systems you may have while we bring your vessel inside our recovery bay. Due to the nature of these circumstances, the initial first contact protocols may need to be abbreviated to ensure your safety. Apologies for any undue stress or inconveniences this may cause. All precautions are being taken to ensure your safety and prevent a first contact tragedy at the Maw of the Devourer. Thank you for your cooperation, and please stand by. You will be contacted with further information and instructions once the immediate danger has passed. She Sama completed the chapter 80 of Destination Haber. The feminine voice of the Espen returned, receiving additional data, including text, image, video, and sensor data. Quarantining and reviewing data for potential intrusive or malicious programs. Data will be made available once processing is complete. System warning. Sensors are detecting a large, unidentified object, rapidly approaching. Object decelerating to match velocities. Estimated time to arrival, 4 seconds. Faster than a flash of lightning. Both Mick and Sarah scrambled out of their seats and up against the glass to catch a glimpse of an actual honest-to-God alien spaceship. Though neither could really see the sleek lines, the intricately painted art across every hull surfaces, nor the rows and rows of weapon systems, the silhouette of the ship was still enough to inspire awe. The massive, blunt bow had passed over the viewports, and the rest of the ship just kept going. It must have been at least 2 full kilometers of ship that passed before a large opening in the bottom of the hull became visible. The now visible recovery bay doors were easily large enough to consume a vessel twice Espen's size. In fact, it could likely house all of the small and most of the medium-sized stations in human operation. As the emptiness of space was slowly replaced by the clean gray interior of the recovery bay, the realization of their circumstance had not fully dawned on them yet. In fact, both were questioning whether or not they had actually died. And this was some sort of hallucination or afterlife? A few proximity warnings lit up on several monitors as the Espen and her crew were fully engulfed and being secured in place. Yeah, and while a gun, impossibly tall ferns and fungi, Ten sat next to the small fire he had made while waiting for Binko to return. The clearing he sat in was interspersed with bioluminescent green and orange flowers. He had run out of charges faster than he had thought, and had spent the past couple hours silently meditating on the spirit of this world. This was the first time he was on a planet hours before it would be consumed by the Devourer. And he wanted to be with the world in its final moments. He wanted to metaphorically hold its hand at the end, as if it were a close friend on the verge of passing. Sadly, he would have to leave soon. He couldn't be here for the true final moments. Otherwise, the prayers he carried would not be brought to the stars with him. He drew up the long, ornate pipe he was holding with his left hand and brought the stem to his lips. This was the 8th and final puff of his prayer for this planet's soul to rest in peace. As he let out the smoke to release it to the heavens, he heard the high-pitched hum of atmospheric ion thrusters rapidly approaching. Opening his eyes and looking towards the source of the sounds, the brilliant blues of the ion thrusters lit up the tree line as the shuttle came streaking in. The engine nacelles rotated and the craft came to a graceful halt in the middle of the clearing like a dancer coming to the end of a performance. The motion of the craft reminded Tens of the grace with which its pilot soared through the air under his own natural abilities. With a sound so quiet that rustling of the leaves nearly masked it, the shuttle set down with its now lowering rear hatch facing towards Tens. As the hatch finished opening and the ramp slid out to the ground, the feathered silhouette of Binko came slowly into view against the brightly lit interior of the ship. In an awkward hop-step gait, the avian made his way down the short ramp and then, much more gracefully, strutted towards the campfire. The flickering light of the campfire shone brightly against the eerie blackness of the moonless night. Though this planet had no moon to bring awe to sentience of this world, the night skies were filled with the dim, yet still distinct majesty of multicolored nebulas and starbursts. The interplay of starlight, excited interstellar gases, and complete lack of light pollution created a beauty so surreal that it had served as a source that inspired countless generations of artists, scientists, and engineers from dozens of species. As the bird slowly finished its strut toward the fire, the flickering light caused iridescent shimmers to reflect against the golden sheen of the reflective membrane in the back of its eyes. Now, just a step and a half away from standing in the fire, stretched wide all of its wings to absorb the warmth of the fire. In doing so, he had unintentionally created a dazzling display of purple and azure plumage, so beautiful it left Tens temporarily speechless. Raising his head and fully stretching out, the croak stared up at the sky for a long moment before finally speaking. "Your kind can't see UV or infrared, right?" Binko asked, already knowing the answer and still looking up. Shifting his gaze and staring up to try to see what he knew he biologically couldn't. Tens's breath was still taken away by the universe before his eyes. The response Tens gave was far weaker than he intended. After another brief moment of shared gawking, Binko finally broke the silence. "Well, that's too bad. But anyways, we're wrapping up. Last civilian was off the planet an hour ago, and the last garrison on the other side of the planet is taking off as we speak. Fleet rally time is in less than an hour, so we better hurry." Turning his eyes towards Tens, Binko reached one of his wings and placed a claw on tens of